Yo, 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 what's up, everybody? Thank you for tuning in to yet again another fantastic indie creator interview. It is your Caped Crusader, Cody, and we are keeping it geekly with our new friend, Hab Oh. We're here to break down Moniqua and the Bedstuy blade and everything in between. Welcome to the stream. How are you doing, my friend?
I'm doing fantastic. How are you?
Hey, I'm having an awesome night. Finally got a new bookshelf, so we're kind of mid-construction here. Very excited about that, though. I ordered a small one. I was really excited, waited weeks, you know, that Amazon, like, impatience, like, looking out the window. Bookshelf gets here, put it together, and it's, like, small. And I can't even fit a book in there. And I'm like, man, I got played. But we are here, keeping it geekly, and what better night to do it than on a Sunday, bringing in the new week. And let's do that with introducing who you are and how you got into indie comics.
Hey, what's up, y'all? I'm Hab Oh. I am a Brooklyn native artist, and I got into comics, honestly, like literally, it might sound generic, but literally when I was a kid. Growing up in elementary school and middle school, I had friends. We would just draw on the loose leaf paper folded up, and the first thing I remember actually doing were like these little Sonic comics, Sonic the Hedgehog.
Oh, that's awesome.
So, yeah, so like we would just, I don't know why Sonic, but we would just make these Sonic comics. And then in middle school, Dragon Ball Z was a thing. So we started doing this Dragon Ball Z comic, and we incorporated other characters into it. And one of my friends actually, we would have this one composition notebook, and each night we would take it home and work on a page, give it back to the next person, and just keep going from there. And I still have it to this day.
That is so cool. I remember drawing little Dragon Ball Z characters, like always as battle damage as humanly possible, bleeding all over the place. Always the same pose, though. That's probably where I didn't, take off. It was always like looking to the side. So how did we see that notebook slowly begin to bleed into actual comics? Like, where did those steps start to take place?
It just happened one day, for lack of a better term, because I always was drawing, I always was doodling, I always was making something. And then at one point, I got into the digital era of it. So you had drunkduck.com, you had DeviantArt. So once I learned how to do that, I didn't even have, this is before like Wacom tablets and all these fancy things we have now. So like I'm using my mouse and I'm clicking, I'm making the line art. It was painstakingly
Yeah, that sounds like
long. Yeah. And then learning how to like color and do everything, like it was just a nightmare, but it was also still fun because I was part of a community. So Drunk Duck, it's still around today, but it was probably like the place to go for webcomics back then. So you had there was this one that turned into a movie with Daniel Craig. I'm trying to remember, Cowboys versus Aliens. So you had that one. That was a big name back then.
Yeah.
VG Cats by Scott Ransomere. You had even Control Alt Delete by Tim Buckley. That became a meme. It's like some years ago that the internet teased about. But having that community around you made you want to do it more. And back then, because we were young, we weren't really thinking about career. We weren't thinking about money. So it was just like for the fun of it. And we would do like little crossovers. We would work together and have all these collaborations. And it was a really good time.
That's so cool.
Yeah. And then I got to the point where I was like, you know what? As I got older, I was like, let me try doing this for real. Like if people are interested in reading my stuff, if people are interested in getting commissions, then let's launch this as a proper thing. So for the last 10 or so years, that's where Habtoons came from.
I love that origin story. That is so awesome. Like taking like, what you grew up doing and your love and passion and just realizing like, hey, I need to take this and I need to run with it. What was that process like, making it more of a legitimate like business for you?
A lot of confusion, to be honest with you, a lot of confusion and a lot of just picking it up as you go along, because for some reason, when it comes to this world that we're in, there's not a lot of information and there's a lot of misinformation. So it was hard to, at least in the beginning. Now it's not so hard, but in the beginning, just figuring out like where to go, how to do this, the right size of your document for printing, the right colors, and how to do word bubbles and lettering properly, and all these things that like I just learned on my own. And getting to the point of like working professionally, I think my first ever like real moment was probably making this comic called, I'm kind of embarrassed to like say the name because it's so corny. It was called Shuriken Alliance. And
I don't think that's that bad though,
It was so stupid because basically like I had this character that looked like I don't know if you're familiar with like Japanese animation, but there was a show called Inuyasha back in the day.
Yeah,
he had the gray hair, so I had a character that looked like him, and then like they come to Earth like it was so weird. They come to Earth from another planet, and they're like this team of superheroes. One guy had super speed, guy was super intelligent, and it was all like really basic. And that kind of blew up. And then like I just stopped doing it, and then went to my other like big project that was on Drunk Duck called Autumn Blood, and that like had a huge community around it. I don't know how or why, but it just did. And it was about this kid. He was kind of like think like Morty from Rick and Morty. He was kind of like this like doofy kid, and he's like an embarrassment or whatever, and trying to get the hot girl, but not really good at it. And then he stumbles into this like library, gets transported to another world, and becomes like this burgeoning, unwilling hero. And people were just eating that up. And I was like, all right, I'm just going to keep going and keep going. I just kept making more and more and more. I started like trying to put myself out in the physical world too, and start selling there. And then it just kept growing and growing.
I love it. That is so awesome. We have Oblivia stopping in over on Twitch, throwing some hype in the chat. Welcome to the stream. That is my girlfriend. So hey, heads up, there's gonna be a half-built bookcase in the living room when you get home. Do not freak out and alarm. So with your comics, when you started really working into it, you started really focusing, we were talking backstage, on representation. So let's really talk about the importance of that and how you reflect upon that within your books.
So that's actually a long story. I'm gonna try to make it short.
You can make it as long as you want to, though. I mean, feel free.
Okay. Hey, it's your show. But basically, growing up, we really didn't see. Obviously, you've heard this narrative a lot of times. Growing up, you don't really see a lot of things that look like you. And in middle school, there was this moment where the middle school I went to was, can I cuss up here? Can I cuss?
Go ahead. Go ahead.
All right. Yeah. So the middle school I went to was black as fuck, man. Like for real. Like every teacher was all about like black power, black love, black representation. Like all our teachers, our deans, like really showed us that, and that stuck with me for such a long time. And then for some reason, from that moment, transitioning from middle school to high school and into like my early 20s, I lost that. I don't know what happened, but I lost that. And I started hating myself for being dark skinned. I started hating myself for being black. Because there was like this whole light skin, dark skin thing going on in the schools or anywhere in our society. So I just felt like ugly. I didn't feel good about myself. I didn't feel right. And that also like reflected in my art. So like all the characters I was making, my main characters, everybody was white. When I would play video games, everybody would be white, because I just didn't feel good about myself. And it wasn't until like maybe my mid 20s, like around 24, 25, where I just had like this rebirth, this reawakening. And I literally remember when it happened. I went to this festival called Afropunk here in Brooklyn. Shout out to Afropunk. And this was like this beautiful celebration of blackness, whether it's alternative black, black that grew up in Brooklyn, black that grew up somewhere else. It was just like everybody came together. There were like these amazing performances, like Jamel Monet was there, Erykah Badu, Mos Def. You had all these heavy hitters there, and you just saw all this beautiful blackness around you. And like something like just snapped in my brain, and it just switched off. And I was like, all right, I gotta work on this. Everything has to change now. And then I just started making all my characters black and all my stories black centered, because it's just important to the point where it can affect you psychologically. Like I just said, I felt bad about myself. And fast forwarding a little bit, I also teach. So I've had moments where I would be in a classroom and showing kids how to design characters, and usually I'll just do mine the way I do my characters all the time. And I remember this little girl, and she was African, she was West African, and she said, "Why do you make the lips like that? Why does this look like that?" And I'm like, because that's what I see as cool or beautiful or amazing. And when she would draw her character, she would draw like the white girls with the blonde hair and blue eyes. And it was just like, it hurt me a little bit that she felt that way, because she didn't like herself. So it's just like this cycle that I'm trying to break with my art. And that's why I put the representation there. That's why I put, because we're not just a monolith, because there are black people that like rock music. There are black people that like EDM. There are black people that like rap. There are black people that travel the world, or some that don't. And it's just like, I want to include everything, and I want everybody to feel like they have a part of their story somewhere in media, whether it's comics, video games, or whatever.
That is awesome. Thank you for giving. Was that the long story?
Yeah.
Thank you for giving us the long story, because that was worth it. That I love every bit about that, especially, you know, the moment with the little girl and kind of wanting to break that cycle. And man, that was a very touching story. Thank you for sharing that. How are you how are you going about that within your comics? You know, how are you seeing that reflected? You know, what type of plots are we seeing, you know, where you are really trying to incorporate the representation within it?
So I have this comic. It's currently on a hiatus right now because I'm reworking a lot of things. But in 2011, I made this comic called Epic Ethel, and I wanted her to be like, and this is kind of corny to say, but I wanted her to be the Black Tank Girl because I love Tank Girl, but I'm like, I want a black version of it. So I made Epic Ethel, and so she's like this woman that lives in Bedstuy, where I'm from, here in Brooklyn, and she has powers. So her powers can vary from shooting fire to having a steel body, and her whole thing is defending her home. And the whole theme of the comic is about gentrification and like me seeing my neighborhood and everything surrounding it change over the last decade or so, for good or ill. And it's like she's defending us from the nasty parts of it. People that want to come in and change the culture, come in and make things hostile for the natives that live here, hostile for the people that grew up here and know how things work. So that's how I implement it in that regard. And also I have a comic called Unit 333, which is based on my own struggle with mental health. And I felt like that was a good representation because at least in the Black community, it's like, I feel like mental health wasn't talked about enough. And in the Black community, it's like even worse. So I felt like that was the moment, that was the call to be like, okay, let me make this story about this cosmic horror, psychological thriller that people can like really dive into. Because when I did this, let me tell you something. When I did this, I also did an exhibition, a solo pop-up exhibition. And it started out as this thing of like, okay, here's my art. Here's all the stuff that like really got me. And then it turned into this huge discussion about mental health. And a lot of people just came out like just saying like how they struggled, or they had a son that struggled, or a family, whoever. And it was just like a beautiful moment. And
that's so awesome.
Yeah, and that's why like I just try as much as possible no matter what. So like that, so the gentrification and mental health, and just also with kids too, and that leads into the other stuff like with Moniqua, where it's like kids need to see themselves, kids need to see other characters that look like them. Everything doesn't need to be, because I feel like we're all also in this like this, and sorry to be a run-on sentence, but I feel like we're also in this state where everything's mature now. Like even the Marvel stuff, they cuss in it, there's like lewd things, and like we had stuff like that too, but now it's just like I feel like we're not making stuff for kids, we're making stuff for the kids at heart that are us, that are older.
Yeah.
You know, so I want to make stuff that also is like for them and specifically for them.
No, that shoo, man, I am loving this. This is so awesome. So but is it like, did you find it challenging switching from like, you know, the different types of stories? You know, it seems like these are like two different types of like, you know, with three, you know, the mental health one compared to the, you know, the one with defending the neighborhood, and then Moniqua, the, you know, the one geared towards children. Was it hard transitioning between all these different types of storytelling?
Yeah, because sometimes, so I feel like my style comes off a little like creepy or freaky, so it's hard to really, at least especially with the visual aspect, to kind of like make sure like this fits with this story, this fits with this narrative, and this fits with that. So it can be a struggle sometimes. I'll be like, I'll get into it, I'm like, oh yeah, this is gonna look crazy, and I'm like, oh wait, hold on, this is not part of this universe right now, let me go back to that. So yeah, definitely.
Are they all like in their own respective universes, or do they collide at any point?
Well, actually, you're going to hear it here first, but yeah, it's a massive shared universe that I've created over like the last decade. So it's kind of like Marvel in a sense before Marvel started doing it. So they stole that from me, honestly. It's the
well, see, I remember you were talking about the one story taking place in Bedstuy, but then you know, Moniqua and the Bedstuy Blade. I was like, okay, there has to be some sort of connection there.
Yeah. So this is sort of like a soft reboot, because I've been doing stuff off and on, and like there are moments where like I'll start a project and just stop and not finish it. So I'm trying to get myself in a habit of like just continuously being consistent, so that like I don't lose, one, my fan base, and two, my interest in doing these things. So this Moniqua and the Bedstuy Blade story is kind of like the soft reboot of everything, and she's like the progenitor of things that are going to affect and carry out through the entire Habiverse, or whatever you want to call it.
That's so cool. I love that. And yeah. I mean, let's touch base upon the mental health as well. That had to was that a hard experience for you to kind of like break into? I know for mental health, you know, I can't speak upon, you know, the Black aspect of it, obviously, but just the male aspect of it, you know, as a man, you're expected to. And you know, for me growing up, you know, man up. That was a big thing. You know, yeah, you weren't supposed to talk about your emotions. You know, the way you were treated. You know, you were just expected just to kind of like stuff it all down and repress it, right? Like you never had any sort of outlet. So, like, how was that? Like finally having that outlet to kind of like break into it.
It felt like the biggest relief, you know, like just the like Atlas, you know, the weight of the world off your shoulder at that point. It was a struggle to create it because I was still by the time I was doing it, by the time I was putting everything together, I was still kind of like right out of that experience. So like it was just very viscerally emotional. And there were days where like I just would not do it. I would not draw. I would not make anything. And then there were days where I'm just like, all right, let's go. And what's interesting though about that, I think that was for that time. I think it fit that because the art is like, it's me, but it's also this other part of me. And it's like distorted. It's weird. It's a little offbeat. And the comic itself is not a cohesive reading experience in the traditional sense because there's a lot of things going on. So I definitely would say it was a struggle on the mental side and on the emotional side, and also worrying about how people will receive it. That was the biggest one there too, because I wanted it to be a communal thing, and I was like, oh my god, what if people think I'm like a creep or insane or this or that? And it's just like, no, it was fine. Everybody loved it. You know.
No, and I think it's nice to kind of be able to do that, to be able to break into that, to be able to take control of it, because like at the end of the day, like, you know, you and I, obviously you probably realize it, like with mental health and stuff, having control over it, you know, not lashing out in anger, not lashing out in rage, like that's the bigger man, right? Like not like, you know, repressing it down destroys you like that. And it's the complete opposite of being a man, at least in my opinion.
Absolutely. I wear everything on my sleeve. I say what I gotta say. I don't hold anything back anymore. And also, I think a lot of things just don't bother me as much. I think I'm in a completely different phase of my life where like, even I just don't like online, you know how people just go back and forth on Twitter or whatever. I don't do that. If I get really upset, if I get really tight with you, I'm just gonna I'm gonna put you in the art. That's it. I'm not gonna be like, oh, let me type my 240 characters here.
I'm gonna kill you in the comic. You're done.
Yeah, exactly.
So, man, like transitioning to a soft reboot, you know, essentially, you know, a children types of story. That is in itself another big jump from like two different parallels. Like, how was it like going into like, I guess a more happier sense of writing? I would almost assume that it's happier, right?
Yeah, no, it's definitely happier. It came from, honestly, it just came from being an educator for the last 6 years and thinking about what they consume. A lot of the kids being on the making it sound like we're in war, but being on the front lines with these kids, these you know, third graders, fourth graders, fifth graders, kindergarten, second grade, you know, middle school. A lot of what they do, what they consume, and I'm sure anybody that has a kid knows too. They're always on TikTok, they're always on social media, and a lot of that stuff is not filtered most of the times, and they just see so much, and it's a lot for them. And I see it affect them, especially the kids that I've taught over the years. And like, it really gets them down, because I went from seeing kids being jovial about, you know, like talking about Gravity Falls and Bill Cipher to making fun of somebody because they don't have the latest Fortnite skin or they don't know how to do a TikTok dance. So my idea is to kind of bring us back to that more jovial, innocent state, because again, if you look at a lot of the stuff that we consume, it's just geared towards the 35 plus people and not to the kids, and they deserve to have more.
Absolutely. Would you say like some of that was inspirations like Gravity Fall? I was picking up Adventure Time as well, like with some of like the trippiness of it.
I would say honestly, because I never watched Gravity Falls, but maybe a little bit of Adventure Time, because I did catch a few episodes here and there. But my biggest inspirations, I guess, as of recently, would probably center around like the classic Nickelodeon cartoons like Class B Supo, who did, you know, Rugrats, Our Real Monsters, where they have like the squiggly lines and they got like these ugly lips and all this stuff.
You're talking my language, man.
Yeah, I love that. I love that stuff, because also we don't see that. So it's a little bit of that and a little bit of like me trying to emulate a lot of the French artists from back in the day, where they try to do this, where they did do this Ligny Claire style, where it's like these refined lines and simple backgrounds, or heavily detailed backgrounds like Mobius. You know, everybody loves Mobius, the biggest sci-fi illustrator there ever was, you know.
I thought you were getting ready to like make a Morbin joke here for a second. I was like, wait, is he talking about like Morbius? Like, we're about to Morb?
It's Morbin time.
No, that is so awesome. Let's break down some of the creative process. You know, do you? It seems I'm kind of getting a vibe that you might put the art down first, or do you do the script? I mean, like how does that work for you?
It honestly varies, man. Like I love coming up with ideas, but I also hate writing, which is weird. So most of the times, like what I'll do, and this is probably like the worst way to make a comic, this is probably the worst way to do it, but I'll like just lay out panels, and then whatever's in my mind at that time and whatever I see in that panel happen, then it comes out that way, and then I'll write the script around that. So for me, depending on what it is, like with Moniqua, I already have that laid out, but there are some comics like Epic Ethel where like depending on what's happening and how I size up the panels or whatever, that just goes that way. It just has a mind of its own.
It's sometimes you have to just go with that flow too, because I mean it leads you to greener pastures, right?
Yeah, exactly. I think that's what art is, right? Like we can control it only but so much, but once it leaves us, once it leaves our mind, it's its own thing. It has its own legs, and then when you put it on the community spaces like Twitter or wherever, then it's you know, something else completely. And I love that.
No, that is awesome. Let's go ahead. We're going to share the pre-order link. So give us a little bit about what we're here talking about today, Moniqua and the Bedstuy Blade. What's the story about? Can you give us a little bit, I guess, about the protagonist as well?
Yeah, so Moniqua and the Bedstuy Blade, first of all, is a challenge for me because this is my first time. This is my very first time doing a completely silent comic. So there's no written dialogue. It's all through expression. And it's like, okay, how do I figure this out? How do I make sure I tell the story and they like everybody's like on par with like, okay, this is what happened. This is what happened. So that part is like a challenge, but it's also really fun because then if I can do this, then I'll just keep doing that shit. But Moniqua and the Bedstuy Blade is all about stepping outside of your comfort zone. Even if you think you're the best at something, there's always something better. There's always something bigger. There's always somebody or something that's going to be a challenge to you. And Moniqua, she's like this, think of like Uber or Getter or whatever delivery service. She's like that, but for treasure. So she's a treasure hunter, and she works with her partner Memi, who is a hobgoblin, which is a creature in my universe.
I love that.
And which is a play on hobgoblin, by the way. So they get this email, and they want to make sure like they get on to bigger and better things. They want to go on this big trip. They don't have money, so it's just like, we want to do the most craziest, dangerous thing in the universe, and they get, you know, this big job. So it's a little bit outside of their means, and they have to team up with some people that they usually might not team up with. So it's about stepping outside of your comfort zone and making sure that you extend yourself and ask for help, because I also have problems asking for help. I've had that for a long time, and I still do. I struggle with that on a daily basis. I could be like out on the street and wounded, like I was in a battle with Frieza, and I still won't ask nobody if I'll just be like, I got it. I'm crawling.
Oh my god! And the thing is, like, then you don't got it, and then they come around, and you're like, I know, all right.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. So it's like this very friendly, you know, it's colorful. I want it to be whimsical, so it's very colorful. All the characters are like very simplistic in their design, and it's just cute and quirky. So I wanted it to be for all ages and specifically for children to consume.
So why put yourself through that, you know, to eliminate, you know, lettering and words and have it where the panels are telling the story for you? You know, that seems like such an impossible, like, I'm looking at it like I would not be able to achieve that. Like, I have no idea how you even did it.
Honestly, one, because I just thought it would be something cool to do, and I thought it would just be a great challenge to just flex my muscle. And two, I saw somebody else do it. I grew up watching Samurai Jack, Genndy Tartakovsky, and then he also has his other show called Primal. And I'm watching Primal, and I'm sitting here like, there is no dialogue in this at all. there's like nothing. It's all based on the movement. It's all based on the environment. Like you really have to focus on framing. You really have to focus on character design, silhouettes, and all these things to really tell a story. And I'm like, could that be done in comic form? And that's how we got here. I'm like, I'm going to do it. If I'm not the first person to do it, I'm probably not. But if I am, here we go. You heard it here first.
So what goes into that, though? I mean, what were some of the challenges that you faced?
The challenge is just trying to figure out like how to do dialogue without dialogue. Because like every moment where I'm thinking of, especially action sequences or somebody like having an exchange, because there's like one scene where they're in a marketplace and I'm like, how do I have it so like they're there, how it's noticed that they're there to shop or find something or find someone. So it's all about just arranging. And that's honestly, like I was telling you backstage, why I had to redo a majority of it, because I'm like, wait, some of this don't make sense. Some of this is not drawn like correctly. So it's a long process, and that's why I also extended the pre-order date to November 9th, because it's a long process and I want to make sure it's like the best version of that as possible.
Did you find yourself like trying to make it like too perfect at times, like and forcing yourself to have to break away?
Yeah, because I'm a perfectionist. Like I'll see something a little too wobbly, because I don't really care about being too on with anatomy, too on par. But if it's like a little bit too wobbly, I'm like, all right, hold on, we gotta erase this whole thing. Let's get rid of this. Let's move this over here. I've redone so many of my own illustrations and older works of art, like it doesn't make sense. So like I definitely am like that person that's like, I need to make it so cookie cutter, but that also hinders me. So I try to be a little looser with it. I try to be more go with the flow, as they say. And that does come out with some good results. It really does.
No, I love that. I had to ask because I was picking that up too. I think we kind of vibe with that, being perfectionists of our own crafts, and it can be hard to break away. But I wanted to ask because in a comic where you take away that whole sense of storytelling, right? Like with words that you could build, that's how you build your exposition is words. So like doing that without words, that just that would man, that is awesome that you were able to work through that. So how many pages are we looking for within this book? Like oh, sorry,
go ahead.
No, go ahead.
No, I was gonna say as of right now it's 20, but knowing me, I might end up doing like 35, 45, depending on how like I want to tell this story. Because like I always have a rubric for myself. I already have something like set up, like, okay, this is gonna be this many pages, there's gonna be this many characters in here, this is gonna be this sequence or whatever. But sometimes, like we talked about earlier, sometimes things take a life of their own. So like those 20 pages might turn into 30, the 5 characters turn into 10, and the villain might turn into the hero by the end. So it's just it's just all up in the air at some point.
So how big of are you looking at making this into a series? Is it going to be a one shot? Like where are we looking at within the world of this?
So funnily enough, Moniqua was actually created during an Inktober project that I did, and it was probably around 2017, 2018. And I liked the characters where like I started putting her in other comics that I did. So she was in like an issue at Epic Ethel. She was in some comic strips. And I was like, wait a minute, what if Moniqua just had her own thing? So I was coming up with ideas. I was throwing stuff at the wall and seeing what stuck. And then Moniqua and the Bedstuy Blade came up. And then I was like, this could be a multiple series thing. So Moniqua and the Bedstuy Blade will definitely be the first one. And if that goes well, or depending on how I feel, there may be some subsequent issues later on down the line.
No, that is awesome. I love the potential and just everything that's gone into it. So before we dive into what's next, though, let's dive a little bit into like how art's like helps you work through some things. I think we were talking a little bit either through DMs or backstage on how art has the capability of helping people work through mental depression and illnesses.
Yeah. So my go-to rule of thumb is that art is for everybody. Whether you are a 50-year vet in comics or animation, or somebody that just started picking up and was doodling in their notebook. I think that art has the power to heal. I believe that it has the power to help us focus. It has the power to help us vent. And I think it also has the power to just make us feel like happy, And I have a friend whose grandmother has dementia. And she told me, because I made this in 2021, I made this downloadable coloring book. and she got a copy. She downloaded it and she started doing it with her grandma. And she told me that like her grandma was like improving in a certain way with the dementia and like remembering things or just feeling a little bit more jovial and happy. And I'm like, oh, that's really interesting. And I like looked it up, and that's actually there's actually a correlation between making art and that, and having that or having anxiety or having depression, where it can improve you over time if you're consistent with it or if you do it often enough.
That's
and I feel
awesome,
like
though.
yeah, and I feel like especially with younger children, that can help them really get things out that they can't normally get out at home or in school. And I've seen that. Going back to the whole education thing and being an educator, I've had kids make comics that were they try to be cool with it and be like, oh, this is based on something else, but like you can tell it was like on their own emotions in real life. And like, let me tell you, the moment that they were able to publish this and have this up and showcased, and everybody received it well, and they were able to just be themselves and talk and just have that the chest puffed out, it just changed their whole attitude.
That's awesome,
Yeah.
dude. Yeah, that's so cool. I love it. I love it so much. It's, you know, for me, when I would do art, I loved it, but I was too much of a perfectionist, man. I know you got to do it to get better at it, but I was not willing to suffer through the path to perfection with it, I guess.
I say honestly, I just say screw it and do what you want to do. I feel like a lot of people oftentimes they have an image in their head and they want to put that image on paper. I say let whatever out, and then move on to the next thing, because the more you focus on that, then it just stunts you, and then you can't create, and then you get frustrated, and now you have that block. So just be free with it, be open to it, be open to what your mind and your heart says, and then just have fun.
Okay, I just feel like you just read me, like word for word. You're like, that's what happens. I get a block, I get stuck, and I'm like, I'm done. I'm not doing this again. Me and my girl, we tried to do art nights. The first night, I'm like, okay, like, what am I doing here?
Right.
So what's next for you, though? I mean, after, you know, the pre-order for this, we get it published, you know, what are you looking at working on next?
Next, I'm going to jump back into this project I did called the Redrawn Portrait Project. And basically, it's my way of highlighting, you know, Black people in sci-fi and non-typical ways. And I've recently gotten to animation, so all these portraits are animated. So I'm going to hold, yeah. And what I'm going to do differently is I'm going to hold raffles and giveaways. So like, they'll have access to it, and then it'll just be like a weekly communal thing, and people can just like, you know, submit ideas or submit their portraits or submit their selfies, and they get it turned into a portrait. So it's all going to be like really cool for the month of October. And other than that, I honestly think that I might jump into AI at some point, not to the point where it's creating for me and I'm posting that alone, but I think as far as like creating concepts and just envisioning things and having a second opinion in a way. Right. So like, let's say you have an idea in your head, you draw something, and then you have that thing create something, and then maybe you can just meld those things together. I think that it can be a useful tool. I don't think it's a replacement for artists. I don't think it's going to destroy careers per se, but I think it can definitely bolster our creativity if used properly.
You know, I think that's a really good take on it. You know, for the most part, I've been kind of staying on the outside of it, but every time I see one of those AI things, like, you could tell it doesn't have the heart and the passion. It doesn't have the direction, the artistic direction, the human touch that makes it fit the panel. It's like a puzzle piece that fits without the actual paint of the puzzle on it, and only the artist can put that paint on that puzzle piece. And you know,
exactly.
Yeah. You use it for, you know, your concepts, because. What else would you use? You'd have to, like, you know, take pictures and stuff. Why not have an AI generate it in 5 seconds, you know?
Exactly. And if you think about it, our world of automation and advancements, like, there's always a human component. Nothing runs on its own. I went to a parking garage today with my girl, and like, there still needs to be an attendant for the ticket where you come into the garage. There's, like, what if it breaks down, or if there's an error? You know, they have an assistance button there. So it's not like AI is going to be like, all the companies are going to be like, oh yeah, we're going to use Dolly, we're going to use Mid-Journey, because again, like you said, and I feel this way too, there's going to be a missing element, which is the heart of the human. You know, like you can write a prompt and it can create a beautiful image, but it's not going to be exactly what you're looking for, because a human mind is going to think differently. A human mind is going to put things in that might be referencing their past or things around them that the AI won't be able to see. So for anybody that's scared or nervous or doom scrolling, like honestly, I feel like we shouldn't worry about it. I don't think there's going to be some change obviously in the industry. There may be in specific areas, but I don't think it's going to just like catastrophically just get rid of all humans, you know?
I would say the art stuff, absolutely. Once you start seeing the robots running around, kicking the doors down, that's when be worried.
Yeah. That's when we got to run. When Boston Dynamics send their robots out into the streets, that's when we got to run.
So what social medias do you want to shout out? I know, we were talking earlier, you're also a Twitch streamer. You do a little bit of podcasting yourself. Go ahead and feel free to shout out anything you'd like to.
Yeah, I'm on basically like every platform because that's what we're forced to do now, right? So Twitter, Instagram, TikTok at HabTunes, twitch.tv/HabOTV, and youtube.com/HabO. And I also have my own website where you can find more of my work, my schedule, upcoming events, and more information about me and things I do, habtunes.com.
Oh, absolutely. Well, holy crap, I appreciate it. This talk was so awesome, man. Hab Oh, thank you so much for breaking everything down. And this was good. This was a jam-packed, 30-40 minutes, and I could not have asked for a better sit down. Everybody, right now, right here is the link for the pre-order. If you're not able to pre-order it, feel free to just share it on Facebook or even Twitter, just anywhere. Word of mouth is 100% free, and you might have someone who's going to love this book. It is for all ages, so a pretty huge demographic there. Feel free to share away. That being said, it is time for us to wrap up. I hope you guys all have a beautiful Sunday night, but most importantly, keep it geekly.